The brain is the organ of destiny. It holds within its humming mechanism secrets that will determine the future of human race. A very well said statement by Wilder Panfeld, a renowned neuroscientist during 1960s, and he was one of the greatest neurologists who worked on epilepsy. Here in the first video of our channel, we will learn the long historical stairs which neuroscience has stepped up till now and who are the scientists who contributed a lot to this field of biology for which it is now. We will also learn some of the interesting facts about these scientists and their success stories and their achievements. So the first field regarding brain and neuron was established upon the name of neurology. So neurology is the branch of medicine that is focused on the clinical aspects of brain and nervous system. The central question is figuring out what is going wrong and what to do about it. Neurology involves diagnosing and treating conditions of the central, peripheral, and autonomous nervous system. Then comes the second term, neurobiology, which is a branch of biology focused on the anatomy and physiology of the brain and nervous system, often across the animal species. The central question is what is there and what are its properties. These might include classifying cell types, tracing pathways, understanding structural differences, brain developmental patterns, and the mechanisms of neurotransmitters. Then the last in this regard comes neuroscience. So neuroscience is also a branch of biology, but the main focus is much more on the mechanism and understanding how human brain works. The central question is how does the brain produce observed behaviors. Neuroscience includes neurobiology and extends it to the theoretical model, neural coding, mapping of cognitive science and psychology into brain activity, neural dynamics, and models of learning, perception, and behavior. When animals are studied in neuroscience, it is a proxy for the understanding humans. So, in short, neurology is the oldest field, then came neurobiology, and the recent one is neuroscience. Let's see the history of neuroscience, how it has shaped, evolved, and revolved. From the ancient Egyptian mummification to 21st century, there are scientific researches on globules and neurons. There are evidences of neuroscientific practices throughout the early periods of history. The Edwin Smith surgical papyrus written in 17th century BC contains the earliest recorded reference to the brain. Plato and Aristotle during 500 to 300 BC considered that brain is the seat of mental processes like emotions and thinking. Aristotle was one of Plato's most favorite students. It was believed that after Plato, Aristotle would become the director of the academy. But due to disputes of intellect among the Plato students, Aristotle didn't become the director and left for the court of Hermias, one of his friends, for a period of 3 years. During that period, he married Hermias' niece. After a few years, Aristotle returned to his home, Macedonia. There he started tutoring son of King Philip II, who in future turned to be the Alexander the Great. Then came Galen in 13 to 200 AD, who believed that brain receives sensory informations and is responsible for the motor control by using a mechanism of fluid energy. Then came René Descartes in 1596 to 1650, who believed that neuron contain fluid, which he called the animal spirit, that is responsible for the flow of sensory and motor informations in the body. The contribution of Descartes was not only seen in the field of philosophy but also in science and mathematics. Being a native of the Kingdom of France, he spent about 20 years of his life in Dutch Republic after serving for a while in the Dutch States Army. He is generally considered as one of the most notable intellectual representatives of the Dutch Golden Age. According to accounts, Descartes had a vision while locked in an oven room In that time, he had several visions, and therefore he believed that he is divinely inspired. Newton continued Descartes' work on cubic equation. The Enlightenment era began during 18th century by disproving the previous Balognese theory by using a technique of water displacement. Then came F.J. Gall and Johannes Bourgeois during 18th century, who proposed the phrenology or the cerebral localization. It is based on the concept that the brain is the organ of the mind and that certain brain areas have localized and specific functions or modules. Then came Johannes Purkinje, who discovered the Purkinje nerve cells in the cerebral cortex. Johannes Purkinje was born on December 18th of 1787. He was the eldest child in his family. Purkinje lost his father at the age of 6. With the family under financial hardship, he had sacrificed a lot. Purkinje made the vital discoveries in the field of biological sciences. He named most of his discoveries after himself. He provided the basis of many scientific references for the modern researchers in the study of nerves, brain, and body cells. Then came P.P. Broca and Karl Wernicke during 19th century, who discovered different parts of the brain and their functions, and later those parts were named after them. Like Wernicke's area is an area of the brain, or more specifically, at the cerebral cortex, linked to speech. It is involved in the production of written and spoken languages. Then came G. Fritz and E. Hirdzik during the onset of 20th century, and they supported the localization and discovered many parts of the animal brain by electrical experiments. Then came Camillo Golgi during 1890s, who discovered the first nerve cell by silver staining, which he called the Golgi stains. He observed the network-like orientation of the axons and proposed the reticulate theory. Camillo Golgi was an Italian physician, biologist, and pathologist who won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1906 along with Santiago Ramon y Cajal, a Spanish histologist. Golgi is considered to be the greatest neuroscientist of the 19th century. Camillo Golgi became a foreign member of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Science in 1913. Then came Santiago Ramon y Cajal during 1900, who proposed the cellular nerve theory indicating the unidirectional signal flow. Santiago Ramon y Cajal was a Spanish pathologist and neuroscientist and is known as father of neuroscience. Remember the name Ramon y Cajal, who was extremely destructive and a nuisance boy during his childhood. At the age of 11, he was imprisoned for destroying his neighbor's yard with a homemade cannon. He had published over 100 scientific works in 3 different languages like French, Spanish, and German. His interest in pursuing studies in medicine came from his father taking him to graveyard to find human remains to study. There is a Spanish television series that commemorates his life as well as an asteroid 117413, Ramon y Cajal, named after him. Then came K.S. Lashley during 1930, who worked on the memory processes and searched for the neural components of memory, which he called the engrams or the memory units. So let's discuss about some renowned Nobel laureates in the field of neuroscience, their achievements and their success stories. Golgi and S.R.I. Cajal, as we just discussed in previous slides, who won 1906 Nobel for their contribution for the enlightenment of structures of nervous system, especially the neural tissues. E.D. Adrian and C.S. Serrington, who won the Nobel in 1932 for their study about neuronal functioning in the brain and spinal cord to send messages. H.S. Dale and Otto Lewy won Nobel in 1936 for the discovery of chemical synapses and neurotransmission. Joseph Erlanger and H.S. Gager in 1944 won Nobel Prize for their discovery in relating to the highly differentiated functions of single nerve fibers. J.C. Eccles, A. L. Hodgkin, and A. F. Huxley won Nobel in 1963 for the discoveries concerning the ionic mechanisms involved in excitation and inhibition in the peripheral and central portions of the nerve cell membrane. Bernard Karch, U. V. Wheeler, Julius Axelrod won the Nobel in 1970 for their discoveries concerning the humoral transmitters in the nerve terminals and the mechanism for their storage, release, and inactivation. Stanley Cohen and Rita Levi-Montalcini won Nobel in 1986 for their discoveries of nerve growth factors or NGF and epidermal growth factors, respectively, who could show how the growth and differentiation of the nerve cell is regulated. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for 1991 is awarded for the discoveries of the function of ion channels. The two German cell physiologists, Erwin Neher and Bert Sakmann, have together developed a technique that allows the registration of the incredibly small electrical currents that passes through a single ion channel. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2000 was awarded jointly to Arvid Carlsson, Paul Greengard, and Eric R. Kandel for their discoveries concerning signal transduction in nervous system. Arvid Carlsson had led to the realization that Parkinson's disease is caused by the lack of dopamine in certain parts of the brain, and that can be an efficient remedy for the disease. Paul Greengard showed how dopamine and a number of other neurotransmitters exert their action in the nervous system, and our famous Eric R. Kandel is rewarded Nobel for his discoveries of how the efficiency of synapses can be modified and which molecular mechanisms can take part behind the memory establishment. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2004 was awarded jointly to Richard Axel and Linda Bibok for their discoveries of pheromones and related odor and receptors and the organization of the olfactory system. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2014 was divided, one half awarded to John O'Keefe, the other half jointly to Maeve Reed Moser and Edward I. Moser for their discoveries of cells that constitute a positioning system in the brain. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2017 was awarded jointly to Jeffrey C. Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael Young for their discoveries of molecular mechanisms controlling the circadian rhythm to understand how such circadian oscillations could be generated and sustained. So the history is very enriched and accountable in case of neuroscience. In this short video, we just discussed the history of neurosciences very briefly. In upcoming videos, we will discuss the nervous tissues, their development, and their signaling mechanism for sure. Thank you and stay tuned with me if you find this lecture beneficial.